Absolutely nothing happened yesterday. Nothing that will change the landscape of everything forever happened yesterday. Nothing. No court rulings, no nothing. No Google's a monopoly. Definitely not that.
I got to go back and look. I don't remember, but when Microsoft was found guilty
Mm-hmm.
of antitrust violations, very similar to Google's
Mm-hmm.
Sherman Antitrust Act, Thomas Penfield Jackson. I don't remember if that ruling included. It must not have. It must have just been. It was like the findings of fact. So and that's pretty much what we just got from
Yeah,
this. Right? So we don't know what the outcome is or the
correct.
proposed outcome, right? There is an extreme version of the story where Google could be broken up. I don't
Yeah,
see that happen. I mean, but well, I mean, I don't know. We shouldn't discount that.
yeah. Search
But
ballot
anyway,
box coming up. I don't know.
yeah. So, but this is just this is. I mean, explicitly in the ruling, this thing is. I think it's like 285 pages long. I still haven't gotten through all of it, whatever the length. But
Yeah, I
I
think it
think
boils down to, and this is paraphrasing, so not perfect.
yeah.
Effectively, part of it was them paying for search, such as on iOS, was deemed to be monopolistic practices.
Well,
Being the default search for iOS, paying 20 billion
it's
bucks was an
it
abuse
was deemed
of
it was
their.
deemed to be anti-competitive because they
Yes.
have a monopoly. So, in other words, the first determination is that they have a monopoly, which they do, right? Just I don't think anyone would question that. It's weird how there's so little nuance with Google, but for some reason with Apple, people are like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
But whatever. Um, anyway, a monopoly, yes, and then it's the behavior you engage in to maintain or grow that monopoly,
Yes.
right? So
Which is
they're
that part of that.
basically it's like a pay for play kind of a thing. So you're paying for that position, you're the default. And they paid Apple, was it 23, 26 billion last year? Jeez, like
I think it was
crazy. Like
the
it's
number that I saw that was for sure. It was 20 billion in 2022. So I don't know
22.
what
Yep. Yep.
in
Yeah.
whatever last year
Yes. It's only gone up since then. So it's 20 plus $billion, whatever it is. So
per year.
per year. Yeah. Which tells you how much search that's just from the iPhone, right? Whatever the iPhone may represent 30 something percent what of their total with something maybe at most. I don't know what it is really, but, between desktop, Android, whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
worldwide. But in the United States, I mean, it's over 50% of mobile. It's, desktop is going to be relatively small. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's a big number.
It's a huge number.
Yeah. So Google's making plenty of money, but it's weird to kind of put Microsoft in like the position of a victim. And of course, there are people with long memories and, not a lot of nuance in their brain who would be like, oh, they deserve it. All the crap they did in the 90s, whatever. It's like, how ironic, it's not ironic. It's,
Mm-hmm.
it's whatever. But in this case, Microsoft was victimized because there was no amount that made sense for them to pay to get Google out of there, right? Like Apple was like, all right, well, we're making this much. What can you do? And they're like, we can't do that. So the other thing that's interesting here is, I don't know why I just smiled when I said that because this could be really bad news, but this is going to impact other companies depending on what
Oh,
goes down.
this
So,
is like so there's like two buckets to this. You're like, yes, something's going to happen to Google. We don't know what,
mhm,
whatever it is. That that's going to take a while. Things are going to whatever manifest.
mhm.
The other side of that to me is more interesting because first off, Apple losing $20 billion for this. That is a material loss for them, and I think it's in their services business where they
It is,
report
yeah.
this. So
This is
just
the dark
imagine
secret of,
imagine
yeah,
you wake up tomorrow and it's like your largest client is just now cannot pay you $20 billion next year.
yep. So Apple's services business, off the top of my head, it was 20 something billion in revenue in the most recent quarter. Like we'll call it, I think it might have been 24, but let's call it just 20, right? So it's not going to be the same every single quarter, but let's say it's roughly 80 billion a year. 20 something billion of
Yeah.
that, it's about a quarter
Yep.
came from Google. Now, Apple has
Oof.
looked at making their own search engine, right? But here's the thing that requires work, effort,
Oh yeah.
money, investment, research. This is just zero effort on their
Yeah,
part.
there's a
Someone hands them a check,
config.ini
doesn't
somewhere where
cost
they
them a
type
freaking thing.
www.google.com and that
Yep.
makes them $20 billion.
Yeah. So that's Apple, but Apple is the richest company on earth. So I don't think anyone's going to cry a river for that company.
I know
So
who they'll
the,
cry
the
over.
bigger
Fall.
problem is going to
I
be
called you
Mozilla.
fall. I know who they'll
What?
cry over.
What's that?
Firefox. Firefox
Yeah,
is going to be.
Mozilla. Yeah, right.
Mozilla is going to be in. Mozilla
This is the
might
only
die.
reason they're in business. I mean,
Yeah.
not that they've tried, to have other revenue streams. In fact, but they just scaled back this year, and this was one of the big things with them. In fact, they came out with just a screed about how awful this business is, and this is another way that Google is propping up Mozilla right now in the same fashion that Microsoft did with Apple when they invested in them in
Yeah.
1999 or whatever year that was. And it's the same theory. It's like, it doesn't cost us much of anything. Who cares? But now we can always point to these guys like, see, there's competition, but they skew the market so badly for browsers because they need that thing to work well for their stuff. And, and they're powerful and rich, and Mozilla is not. So that, I don't know.
I don't know if
this gets into
Firefox
a weird area.
will die per se, because it could always be maintained and whatever. But like Mozilla got, I thought it was like $300 million per year or something from Google. Which,
Yeah, I don't remember what that number is, but so one of the things I try to explain to people about antitrust, because it's such a core, it's almost like a foundational part of the antitrust as a theory, or as a, I don't know what it is, an entity or whatever, that people just don't, I have a hard time with, right? So Apple, for example, this past week just filed a legal attempt to get their antitrust case thrown out. And in there, and I'm paraphrasing, but they say something like, well, the government says that all we did was we engaged in all these illegal activities to keep competitors down. But what we really did was we innovated, and we made an awesome product, And the truth is they did both. And those two things are not mutually exclusive, right?
yeah,
They can be both of those things. The terrible company that acts in an anti-competitive manner to protect their monopoly, and the innovative company we all know and love that everyone's a big fan of, whatever. Those two things are true. And it's true of Google too. Like, Google's argument here is like, hey, the reason we're so popular is because we're so great. Like, we make the best search engine. Yes, you do. But you also engage in these horrible. Okay, so that's one level, but the Mozilla thing introduces a twist. So legally, the right thing to do, if you will, I guess the correctly legal thing to do here is to, regardless of specifics, prevent Google from engaging in the behavior that they've been engaging in that has been found to be illegal, right? So in other words, they can't pay Mozilla or Apple or whomever to be default search on any platform, browser or mobile or desktop, I guess, whatever, and any browser, any platform. Okay, that's fine, except for that could kill Mozilla.
yeah. So
Is there a provision in the law that could, I mean, how do you account for that?
So from the most recent agreement that I could find, Google is paying Mozilla between, depending on the year, 400 to 450 million a year.
Right.
First off, I don't know what they do with all that money, because I just think of them as a browser and maybe like the email client. But
yeah, I mean, well, so that's one of the small controversies around Mozilla. Their CEO is very well paid there, and has lots of job related perks and whatever. It's there's some expenses there. It's not $300 to $400 million a year, but
right.
but whatever. We're talking like a star baseball player contract here or whatever. Mozilla owns no percent of the market. They're nothing. Like, this is a hedge. I mean, it doesn't really benefit Google to do this directly. Like, in other words, I don't know what how much money do they earn from Mozilla as the default search? It's hard to say, but
Yeah.
there's so many conversations here. A big part of this ruling was this notion of the power of defaults, and they brought in these experts who were like economists and psychologists and whatever, and the general agreement is that the power of defaults is real, and because Google is the default on the iPhone, just to use that one example, most people just don't change it. That's true. Well, I'll accept that that's true. I assume that's true. I mean, we'll just accept that that's true, but Here's something that kind of throws a wrench into that theory, because Google is also the exception to this rule. That the best and most popular browser is Chrome. And yes, they are the default on Android. But if you just look at desktop, they are by far the most. They're like 60, 70% of all desktop. They are not the default. They're not the default on iPhone, but I bet they're the most popular browser on iPhone too. I mean, they might be number two and it's close. I don't know, but it's they Chrome kind of, it doesn't prove anything, but it's the exception to that theory that I think, which is particularly relevant because we're talking about Google here. So I don't know. I mean,
You know what's going to be hilarious? If the ruling that comes out, like it's the end of the day, it's like, what does Google have to do to satisfy whatever this antitrust? If they have to spin out Chrome, like if we're right back to browsers being
Chrome,
the thing,
yeah.
and Chrome has to become its own company.
Well, I mean, so this didn't deal with Chrome directly, unless I'm missing something. But
No, it didn't. But
no, but you're making a good point, because Chrome and search are inextricably, that's a word, linked.
Yep.
Like Chrome only exists because of search.
Yep.
Search only exists and is only powerful because of advertising. Like there's a direct chain here. Like the Chrome was created to make sure that Google's products worked as well as they could. And from a consumer benefit standpoint, as best as it could means things like works fast and accurately renders web pages, right? But that's not really what this is about. I mean, yes, that work is occurring too, but it's really about the tracking stuff, so they can feed their advertising engine. So these things are all inextricably, I don't know why I keep using that word. They're all linked explicitly, maybe is the better word. And by design, like it's a concerted, effort, right, to combine these things. So I don't know what to tell you. This gets to the, Microsoft in their pissiest moment. The judge said, you need to ship a version of Windows without IE. And I said, all right. And they just ripped out IE without fixing the stuff that broke. And they're like, here you go. That's what you asked for. And it's like, you thought I meant you should ship a browser that does not work. It's kind of like the way Apple's doing the EU stuff right now.
Yeah, it really is.
Malicious compliance. And he's like, that obviously is violating not just the spirit of my order, but the obviously it has to work. But Microsoft had integrated Windows with IE in such a way that they were they couldn't be separated. They did that not for good technical reasons, but to make it, hard for competitors to be as integrated. So yeah, it's a complex
very
topic. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and there's more probably than we've even brought up.
Is there? I don't know the answer to this. Is there any timeline on any of this? Like we just got the ruling.
No,
that's
so
the first thing.
Yeah, I looked for that. That was the one thing I looked for. One of the things, right? So this is a long document. It's very complicated, and you kind of go through it, and you're looking for language, right? And so one of the things I was looking for was, well, what are the, what's the outcome here? Like, what are you proposing? And the judge doesn't, right? So there will be apparently a hearing at which both sides will, present their case, I guess, for whatever should happen. Google will say nothing should happen, right? And then there will be I guess we'll call it a final judgment. I'm trying to think back to the language from the Microsoft trial. I think it was findings of fact, which is what we have here. I don't know that they actually called it that, but that's what this is. And then the next one, I guess, will be the final judgment. And in Microsoft's case, the final judgment was, you're going to be broken up, and that didn't happen because of some weird behavior on the judge's part that got him thrown out the case and whatever. And eventually they settled. But in this case, there's a bunch. The DOJ will most likely proactively or in response to a judge request submit their recommendations for what should happen, right? And which could include fines, behavioral changes. That's a definite. Like, these agreements have to stop. We'll see. I don't know that the Mozilla thing is that weird nuance, because it's one of those things, like, we know what the technically correct thing to do is, legally correct, maybe we'll call it, but the collateral damage here
be massive.
is really unfair.
Well,
for a
there's
small company like Mozilla. For Apple, who gives a crap? They're the richest company on earth, like I said. But like,
here's like things that sit in the back of my brain. Let's make it about me for a second
yeah.
because I like making my things about me.
Well, I mean,
Um,
that's
so
sure.
YouTube plays a role in this
Hmm.
in some capacity. We don't quite know if anything's going to change, but
Hmm.
it's the advertising side, which Google
Hmm.
has already been found to be, wherever they are in there. If they come out and say, okay, YouTube's got to be spun back out. You guys acquired YouTube. YouTube needs to be go its own thing.
Well, yeah.
Well, think about all the creators like who make videos like we're doing right now
Yep.
on YouTube that make money from that could
So
be impacted.
yeah, so you mentioned Chrome and now YouTube, right? And so again, I have to go look at the document, see if Chrome's in there. Chrome will be in there, but rather the explicit connection, if those things are somehow tied. It's hard to say. But it's not hard to say that from a business structure perspective, those two things are in fact 100% linked.
Mm-hmm.
One exists because of the other. They exist to serve each other, et cetera, et cetera. YouTube is actually a little nuanced because YouTube is treated as a separate business within Google, and it does fall under the same. It is a parent structure where it's like ad revenue that comes from search, other ad revenue, and then YouTube. Like they're actually separate. So even though, I mean, I don't know how who does? I mean, I don't know how it's like, how it works behind the scenes, but like that one's a little more difficult to say because
Yeah, it's not that
it's almost off to the
I should
side.
rephrase that. I don't necessarily think they would spin out YouTube. I don't know because YouTube on its own, I don't know if it would be sustainable because of the overhead, but whatever. It's
Yeah.
more so if Google's advertising practices are found to be
Yeah. Well, but
leveraged by search and that they have to spin out their advertising business and then that impacts YouTube and then that impacts everybody who depends on YouTube revenue.
yeah. No, okay. So yeah, there's a very, I mean, I think it's obvious that whatever happens, part of it could impact YouTube because a lot of Google searches go to YouTube, right? Like YouTube is a business. Does YouTube have a monopoly, right? I mean, yeah, arguably they do. If you are just talking about like web-based
I was
video
gonna say
platforms,
like desktop video.
but
They
the
have
thing
a
is, but what about TikTok?
no. Well,
I know
mean
it's desktop,
literally
but
desktop video. I mean like
desktop's small.
yeah,
Desktop's too small. I think we're
but
getting to the point where we can't
mobile
count that.
video, I wouldn't think because there's TikTok, there's Instagram Reels, there's other services
This
out there.
okay, but see, you understand, like this is another primary component of the whole
Yep.
antitrust discussion, which is the definition of market, right?
Yep.
And so Google would say, hey, look, we are one of a million ways that people can see videos online. There are services like Netflix and Amazon Prime. There are kind of social media style platforms like TikTok, and then whatever Reels and whatever that nonsense is. And when you take in that market is big. They're a big part of it, but they're not a monopoly, right? The thing you're describing, like desktop video, like like them and Vimo or whatever, yeah, they have a monopoly, but market size matters. And compared to, that you could still throw in TikTok and be like, well, but TikTok is also creator user generated content. And they're maybe, I don't know if they're bigger or smaller or whatever they are, but they're big. So, like I don't know, but I don't know that this, I don't know. This can be the fallout here is big. This is the thing I've been saying for a while with everyone, Microsoft. Oh, no one's ever controlled the market like Microsoft. Yeah. The market was tiny. There was hundreds of millions of units back then. This is billions and billions of people. When you talk about companies like Google and Apple, especially, their impact, their ability to do harm is not exponentially, but it's dramatically bigger than anything Microsoft could have done. And Microsoft did some really crappy stuff, but my argument is these companies are worse. And it's not just because they're doing the exact same thing and more, which they are, but because their impact is so much broader. So many more people, billions and billions of people. Apple's addressable market today might be as much as 10 times the size of Microsoft's in 1999. It's something like that. And I don't think people think that way.
I always had this stupid idea. This is funny to me, so I'm going to say it. Might not be funny to anybody else.
Okay.
I always had this stupid idea for an SNL skit, but like for the Microsoft audience, where Microsoft's in court being accused of monopoly. Satya Nadella is sitting on the stand. He's like, "Oh, we're a monopoly. How'd that Windows Phone work out? How'd that Zune work out? How'd that band work out?" And just start listing how'd Groove Music Maker work out? How did Groove Music work? How did Xbox Music work? And he just has to list all of their failures in a row.
I mean,
I told you it was
Yeah,
funny
that
to me. I didn't say it was funny to you.
no. Well, I mean that. Okay, so that's a very Microsoft specific example, obviously.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
mean, one of the weird things about a company defending itself in court when they're accused of being a dominant superpower of some kind is they have to pretend they're not, and they're like, "Oh, we're getting killed over here. You don't
Mm.
understand. It's like it's a hard mark." Like Apple and Google and Amazon could all point to all their failures. What about that stupid Amazon Fire Phone that came and went in a flash? Or, Google. I mean, Apple could be like, "Oh, we're going to do this dustbin Mac thing, and it didn't work, cracked and stuff." Like the, we made keyboards for, that were terrible for 4 years or whatever it was. Like, they've all failed in some way. I
I don't. I
mean,
feel like Microsoft's failed a lot harder.
yeah, but you're in the Microsoft world. Like you see, you know what I mean? Like I don't know
Yeah,
that.
but
Like,
what
I
what
would,
is what
if
is
you were a Google fan,
Apple's
you've
Nokia?
heard of killed by Google, right? Like you know that Google throws shit out there and just stops
Yeah, but none of
pretending
that
it even
stuff was
exists.
Google. How much money did they spend making Google Reader? Not as much as they spent to buy Elop.
Jeez. ELOP as a service. Um, I I don't know, man. You got Microsoft generates so much cash.
Oh yeah, but it's it's
They
all from like
subsume these
like
costs.
three businesses though.
That's the thing. Like, no, I'd have to go back and look. Like, whatever their market cap was in 2014, 15, whatever it was. They subsumed Nokia for what, 7 billion, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Wrote it off. What was their? How much cash did they generate that year? I bet it was more than $7 billion.
Oh,
It was a
easy.
lot more. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so from the outside, you look at it from like our human perspective. You're like, oh my god, that was a huge failure. And from Microsoft's perspective, you're like, you invest, you try. Sometimes it doesn't work out.
Yeah, they've
I'll
already
tell you
made
what did
back
work out was this cloud thing. That's going great.
since they announced the acquisition of Activision, they've already made that money back.
In like a cash sense, like
Yeah,
cash
in net
generation. Yeah,
income.
that's true. But I will asterisk that by saying they also spent a lot of that on
Oh yeah.
AI infrastructure. I mean, but that's the point. I mean, Amy Hood made this point at the end of the earnings call last week. She goes, this is a year in which we have all these whatever normal competitive economic headwinds. We subsumed Activision at a cost of 80 whatever billion dollars, and what was the other one? Oh, we're spending now I think almost 20 billion a quarter on it, but it was 10, 10, 15. We've gotten up to 20, and we will do so for the next year, and we are paying cash.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we're making the money. Who cares?
Yep. Band, Windows Home Server, Windows Media Server.